All right. First thing I'm going to say is that I am not an expert, and I am figuring all these things out as I tune and as I go through documentation and things like that. So totally open. If somebody thinks things I say are wrong or incomplete or I don't say it correctly, you can totally add it in the comments. This is for the community and to help the community, and so I'm not hard and fast any of this stuff. But the point here is I'm going to just walk through a couple of these RPM tables that I have defined. Um, Currently, these are all S58 bins. And so B58 will be a little different. I'll probably do a video for B58 when I get around to it. And there are a lot of RPM engine speed tables in these bin files. I didn't define all of them. I defined the ones that I believe are the ones that help people change idle and redline and all those fun things. I personally own a B58 Supra and have tested tables on my own B58 and have been able to raise the rev limiter. And it's not as easy as just changing one table. And I'll walk through that really quickly here, and I'll also talk about some of these tables. So I don't have these folders defined in the XDF code that I share. I basically created my own saying engine speed and then gearbox centric ones. You can label these however you want. But the first couple tables, the first three are gearbox related. So there's a maximum RPM that the gearbox will allow. And you have to change this when you change the other RPM limits. So let's say you want to rev to 7,600 because you want to live dangerously and, you don't mind picking up valve stems and valve springs off the ground. So, you change this to 7,600, and there's some other tables I'll show you. But this one is a very important one. If you don't change this, your RPM won't change. I'm sorry, your RPM redline won't change. There's one that is based on gear. Most of you probably won't ever need to change this other than, these 7,200 ones, or maybe you just want to, somehow rev to 8 grand or 7,600 in eighth gear because you're at, I don't know, salt plains or something. I don't know. But you need to change it here too because this is a gearbox limit as well on the RPM. So gears across the top, RPM across the bottom, pretty straightforward. This third one is based on gearbox temperature. So the actual gearbox that the DME, gearbox temperature the DME is getting. And it's by gear. So up top is gearbox temp in Celsius and gear and number, obviously. And you'll see that when the gearbox gets really hot, it starts bringing down the RPM to help protect itself. But for all the other temps, like if you want to raise again your limiter, you want to raise them here too. All right, so let's get into stay with the redline tables. So the first main one is RPM max main. You will change this to whatever RPM you want. There's crankshaft. You also have to change this as well. You won't be able to rev higher unless you change this. There's some max tables. So if there's a knock event, it keeps it down. If the car is actually knocking at that point, there's a hard coding. I think it's set to 8 grand in this one. I think it's set to 85 or something like that. Obviously, you probably won't ever have to change this. There's a limp mode, so you can't go above 5,000 RPM in limp mode. Probably don't want to change that. And then there's the actual drive mode. So there's eco mode, comfort mode, race start, sport mode, sport plus mode. These are pretty obvious. They are the RPM limit in each of those modes. Some of the bins have this at 7,200 and some of them have it at 7,000. So if you want to change RPM limit in a specific mode, you change it here. Remember, you have to also change it in RPM max main, RPM max crankshaft, and these gearbox tables in order for it to go above what's set in those. Then there's partial load. So this is like not full throttle, not full, target load. So let's say you're on a racetrack and you're full throttle, you're coming up to a corner, you actually have to feather the throttle. It basically sets a different RPM max. Most most of the time you're not going to be feathering the throttle right at redline, so this doesn't matter, but you probably want to raise it with the other ones. Now there's also negative load. So when you get fully off the throttle and you basically, go into negative load. Some bins, this is set differently, like 6,800, 7,000, etc. So if you're like right at red line and you like let off right into before braking zone, I found if this is actually set lower than partial load or even max, you can get a weird little RPM limiter that actually bumps it down to whatever this is set at. So let's say you have RPM max set at 7,200. So if you're full throttle, you'll hit the rev limiter at 7,200. Let's say you let off at 7,100, and this is set at 6,900. It will basically bump it down to 6,900 and can also disrupt the car. So change this with care. Then there's a couple others like cam phasing when it's in diagnostic mode and high pressure fuel pump error. Probably want to keep those as is. So that's basically the max ones. Then there's a bunch of idle tables. So there's an idle table for automatic. There's this is just when you're sitting idling. It goes by coolant and oil temp. So you can see, it kind of stays high as the car is warming up and then settles down into the resting idle of 740. Some bin files have this at 600 something. It just depends on the rev. Sorry, no pun intended, the actual bin file number. Then there's a throttle operation. This is basically, I think it's used when you have it in drive. But usually if you have it in drive, it's not resting at 740. So, whatever. Then there's one for manual transmission. There's the same throttle operation for manual transmission. Then there's gear engage. So let's say you have your foot on the brake and you go from, park or neutral to drive, and first gear, whatever, same thing. And then I believe the set point gear engaged is the hard limiter of the gear engaged. So you basically have to change both of them. I haven't done a ton of testing on these, so, kind of tweak them for yourself and see what happens. Anything different happens, feel free to comment. So that was just a really rough overview of the engine speed tables. Hopefully people find these valuable. See you guys next time.